Yo, Shortbox Nation, this is Botter, and I'm here to tell you right now that con season starts early this year with the return of Northeast Florida's premier anime, comic book, and sci-fi event, Collective Con. That's right, Northeast Florida's largest pop culture convention returns for its 10th year on March 8th through the 10th at the Prime Osborne Center in Jacksonville, Florida. 10 years of Collective Con, they're pulling all the stops out to make sure this is a can't-miss event. And the guest list they got going, don't even get me started on the guest list. I mean, they've got A-list celebrity guests and voice actors from some of your favorite movies, anime, and video games like Elijah Wood and Sean Ashton, Ray Park, Trisha Helfer, Ross Marquand, Max Middleman, and Bo-Katan herself will be there, Katie Sackhoff. Tell me what other convention is giving you the opportunity to meet Frodo and Sam from Lord of the Rings, Darth Maul, and One Punch Man all under the same roof. Only at Collective Con. And if you're looking to get some of your favorite comics signed, or if you want to get an original sketch from some of the best comic artists in the world, well, you're in luck, because there'll be plenty of comic and creator guests there, like DC comic artist extraordinaire Clay Mann, Harvey Award-nominated illustrator John Taylor Christopher, Marvel and DC cover artist Chris Stevens, and acclaimed Star Wars author Timothy Zahn. They'll all be at Collective Con this year. And if you're looking to bring the family, or if you want to make a weekend out of it, you're in luck, because there'll be so much going on at Collective Con that weekend in the form of vendors, fan panels, video game tournaments, cosplay contests, after parties, and a bunch of fan events. You can purchase single and 3-day weekend passes now using the link in this episode's show notes, or by going to collectivecon.com to book your tickets and hotel. Buy your tickets now, and I'll see you at Collective Con, March 8th through the 10th. Now let's start the show.
Yeah, man. I just love comics, and show me the one that I haven't seen yet. You know,
right.
Show me the one that doesn't fit my definition, and I'll expand my definition for you.
Ladies and gentlemen, I present to you the Shortbox Season 6. Yeah.
Yo, Shortbox Nation, welcome back. And to our new friends joining us for the first time, hello, and welcome to the Shortbox Podcast. I am your host, Botter Milligan, and this is episode 299. Great timing on your part, because we're joined by a guest who happens to be one of my favorite comic creators in the industry today, Mr. Jim Rugg. And hopefully by the time you're done with this episode, he'll be one of your favorites too. You'll get to meet him very soon, as well as my co-host for this episode, my right-hand man, Cesar Cordero. But first, 2 quick house cleaning items just to get them out the way. If you aren't already subscribed to the podcast, go ahead and do that right now. You've already made it this far. Why not stay up to date with our future releases? Our landmark 300th episode is 2 weeks away, and you won't want to miss that. We're covering the iconic Amazing Spider-Man number 300 as voted by our patrons. And since we're on the topic of patrons, last but not least, if you enjoy the show and you want more Shortbox content like bonus episodes and merch, or simply want to help us keep the lights on, consider becoming a Shortbox patron. $1 or $2 a month goes a long way in helping us grow the show, and we've got some cool stuff in exchange for those greenbacks. See for yourself at patreon.com/theshortbox. This special episode is brought to you commercial free by our sponsor, Gotham City Limit, Jacksonville, Florida's premier location for comics, collectibles, toys, and more. Check them out if you live in the area or ever find yourself in Jacksonville looking for a really awesome comic shop. And with those shameless plugs out the way, I want to move on to our main event, and that's the guest joining us today. He has been recognized by the Professional Association for Design. He's won awards like the Ignatz, as well as an Eisner Award, and so many more accolades that we would honestly need another episode just to get through them all. His bibliography includes titles and projects like The Guild from Dark Horse, Street Angel, The Plain Janes, Aphrodisiac, and even more. He's also one half of one of my favorite comic book focused YouTube and podcast series, Cartoonist Kayfabe, alongside fellow Pittsburgh comic creator Ed Piskor. And he's currently promoting his new project, Octobriana 1976, the world's first fluorescent black light comic book, available online and at your favorite local comic shops. Shortbox Nation, we are proud to welcome Jim Rugg to the show. Hi, Jim. How are you?
I'm great. Thanks for inviting me on.
No, it is a pleasure and an honor to have you on, so thank you.
Absolutely.
Jim, can I go ahead and get my fanboy moment out the way?
Oh, my God, dude.
And pay my respects for how bombastic and sexy the physical comic of Octobriana is. My girlfriend caught me.
Oh, this is a good story.
She got me in my...
It's a rough start.
My girlfriend caught me, and that's about it for the show, guys. I'll see you later.
Well, when the package arrived, she noticed that I was unusually, really hyped for it. I was like, oh, man, the package from Jim Rugg came in. And I immediately waited until nighttime. I went in my room, and I have these like fluorescent lights that you can, change with an app. So I went ahead and changed it to like the black light feature. And I was in this dark room with my one little light, like just pouring over this comic book. And she walks in and she's like, "What is going on in here?" And then she had to spend the next 30 minutes hearing me like just gush over and give her a dissertation of how like amazing Octobriana is. So yeah, that was my fanboy.
That's great to hear. Thank you. That's awesome. And a much happier ending than
what it could have been.
I know. Can you imagine? It's like Jim Rugg ruining relationships everywhere.
Jim, how about we help some of our listeners who are new to the game? Will you do us the honor of introducing your comic, Octobriana 1976, and tell us what it's about?
Yeah, absolutely. The first thing is it's the world's first blacklight comic. And what that means is it's printed with fluorescent ink, which was not the easiest thing to do, but it does glow under like, the black light, the UV light. So it's weird that hasn't been done before. It's popular in posters going back decades. And That's how I got the idea. I had made a blacklight poster. I do a lot of printing. And so it was like, I think I could do this with a comic book. And then it was, what comic? What's a good story that's worthy of this kind of like 1970s psychedelic effect? And that brought me to Octobriana, it's a real character. That's a character that came out in the early 70s in a book called Octobriana and the Russian Underground. And it's about this group that was opposing the USSR. And they were doing it by making this superhero underground comic called Octobriana. So she's this superhero from the 60s of this underground movement that was the spirit of revolution. And I thought that's the coolest, like, it's perfect. And I imagined like American cartoonists getting hold of this character, the underground American cartoonist, and making a psychedelic comic out of it to kind of show solidarity with their Russian underground counterparts. And so it's the story of this warrior woman facing off against a robot Stalin who has a new doomsday device that he wants to test. And it's part of this underground Russian group. And they call on Octobriana as like, they've got to save the day. They've got to stop robot Stalin. And she's their best hope.
It's awesome.
I feel like we might as well just mic drop. I mean, dude, go buy the comic. That's it. Thank you for joining.
Instantly grew 70s mutton chops just hearing this. It was amazing.
So how much more different was your approach to this comic, whether artistically or process-wise, versus some of your other bodies of work? I imagine it was a vastly different approach in some ways.
All of my comics are pretty different. I think about style as being part of the storytelling. It's the same as if I'm, like creating a new character and you work out like, what's the character look like? What do they wear? It's the same deal for me in how I draw, the color palette that I use. So it's not, I think all my comics look very different from project to project, but the process isn't that different. I kind of reinvent the wheel with each project, which isn't the most efficient way to work, but it's a very fun artistic way. It gives me a chance to, I spent a lot of time looking at blacklight posters, which was pretty fun. So that's the biggest difference maybe, or the influences in the stuff that I'm looking at. I tend to like a lot of different stuff. You mentioned cartoonist kayfabe in the intro, and like we cover all these different kinds of comics because we love all these different kinds of comics. And so I learned to make comics from looking at other comics. And, what happens is I spend a bunch of time working on a graphic novel or a comic, and then I want to do something different. And so it's like a whole new, you almost start over of like, okay, I'm looking at poster design now. I'm looking at Russian constructivist posters. I'm looking at 60s superhero comics, 70s underground comics. And I'm trying to figure out what do I like about these different pieces? And then, just hitting my sketchbook. And I made a process zine that went along with making Octobriana 1976. And the process zine's 350 pages, but it kind of shows my process of exactly how I put it together. And in the beginning, I wrote out a story, kind of a loose, plot, I guess you'd call it. And then I sat down and did a bunch of drawings of Octobriana to try to figure out like, okay, do I like this enough to like spend the time making this an actual comic book? And that's what the drawings were for, was just like, have fun, draw this character, figure out, what she would look like if I'm drawing her, if I'm going to do my own interpretation, what that will look like. And so it's just like, have fun. It's whenever I was a kid and I would just sit down and draw when it was my favorite thing to do. I want to do that as much as I can. So it's part of the process, is figuring that part out. Like, what's she look like? What am I drawing with? What's the whole book look like? Stuff like that. And it takes a little bit of time. It's a little process, but it's also very enjoyable for me. And, I teach a little bit, and I kind of encourage my students, like, find the stuff that you enjoy. Find the stuff that makes you wake up ahead of your alarm clock to get to that drawing table or to your iPad or whatever you're drawing on. Almost like that enthusiasm's the compass.
So I have a question, and I want to definitely jump back to the Octobriana, but you mentioned picking up a pencil when you were younger. Do you remember the first comic you ever did? And this can go as far back as when you were a little kid.
Yo, this is Botter. Sorry for interrupting this episode, but I'll keep it brief. I wanted to let you know about a massive sale we have going on over at the Shortbox Store on all of our merchandise and apparel. That's theshortboxstore.bigcartel.com. You can now save 20% off your entire order using the discount code YOO, Y-O-O. So if you've been waiting for the right time to finally buy that gauntlet snapback, or if you ever wanted to buy any of the shirts you see me wear on the podcast, well, now's your chance to get them for a steal. We still have a few sizes left of everything, but they won't last long, and once they're gone, they are gone. And then I mentioned that all of our apparel is screen printed on high quality material. None of that heat transfer or direct to garment stuff. Our shirts are some of the most comfortable ones you'll ever wear, and the hats look even better in person. So wear your support for the Shortbox Nation proudly, knowing that you're going to look damn good doing it. Get to theshortboxstore.bigcartel.com as soon as you can, and don't forget to use that discount code YOO, Y-O-O, to save 20% off your entire order. All of this information can be found in this episode's show notes if you want to get there faster. Thanks for not pressing fast forward. Now back to the show.
I did a lot more drawing than comics. Like, comics are hard, man. It's really easy to be excited to do a drawing.
Sure.
It's much harder to do like page after page of try to make the characters look the same. Probably the first serious stuff I tried to do was in high school, and they were terrible. They were image derivative kind of stuff.
Right.
And I did one, I think the character was named the Snowman.
Nice.
And it was like a bad 80s action movie, like a VHS straight to video kind of character, going around with this parka and a big rifle, and I didn't even know what he was shooting at, probably eventually Bigfoot, but it starts out as some paramilitary thing. And by the way, what I just described, maybe 10,000 times better than the actual comic was.
I don't know if I believe you. I'm going to just live in my own brain about the Snowman. So then you had also kind of mentioned, as far as teaching was concerned, how long have you been doing that, man?
I think about 7 or 8 years.
Oh, wow.
I came onto this program at the School of Visual Arts. It's a master's program called Visual Narrative. So it's multidisciplinary in its approach. And we have filmmakers, animators, video game designers, picture book illustrators and writers, and of course, comics and graphic novels. And I'm probably leaving out things. But the idea, like for my class, I teach one called Visual Story. And it's essentially how to tell a story visually and how, almost like it's a language, right? And how do we all understand that, audience, and creators. And then I teach a class in the spring called Digital Short Story, same program. And it's the students create a story from concept to publication in 15 weeks in that class. It's been very rewarding. It's certainly part-time. It's one class in the fall and one class in the spring. But it's been amazing working with students because it forces me to read a lot of stuff that I wouldn't otherwise, read or think about in terms of genre, format, even things like games. Like, it's such a different mindset to kind of look at a game and think about how it's working narratively and visually. So it's been pretty exciting, in terms of keeping my iron sharp, so to speak, like keeping me on my edge. I think I'd probably get more out of it than any of the students individually, but hopefully collectively it sort of balances out.
Among all of because you mentioned like even your students inspired you as well. What's been like maybe the most maybe your favorite thing that you've gotten into because of your students, or maybe one that's like surprised you, like, oh, I didn't think I'd like this, but it's pretty good.
Oh man, I take in so much stuff. This is always the worst question for me because I'm never quite sure.
Way to go, Potter.
Let me see. I've been looking at Metal Gear Solid lately because we got into a discussion on the designer. And so that's been kind of interesting, like, because again, it's just something I don't know very well. And there's a lot of overlap in terms of design and storytelling amongst all visual narratives. But this one in particular is kind of me going down a rabbit hole and looking at examples. And so that's been kind of interesting. But like I said, it happens pretty much throughout the year. They're constantly throwing things at me, and usually it's their work is what we mostly focus on, but occasionally we do spin off.
I think my favorite part of supporting the Kickstarter, when I got the email, hey, don't forget about the process zine, it was, with all due respect, probably my favorite part of the Kickstarter because I am such a process nerd. I mean, C will tell you, I get more excited about the behind the scenes documentary on how they make stuff rather than like the finished product.
This is true.
And I was wondering, do you think that research, the research and the dedication to, diving in and going down and doing your homework, do you think that's an underrated part of comic book creating? I feel like, a lot of the times the focus, especially for new creators, is the art and storytelling. But what do you think about the research process?
I love research. And I always say that if people don't like it, they're doing it wrong. Because research, and I'm making air quotes, is me basically looking at whatever I'm excited to look at. I've kind of crafted what I do so that I'm mostly doing what I want to do, as opposed to, say, working on a monthly assignment where I'm stuck with you have to draw, this cab racing around the corner. I'm much more, I've created this space where it's much more, what am I really interested in? And so, it extends to what I'm drawing, but it also extends to what I'm reading in my free time. I like that part. And I think research, I like Alan Moore. I don't think he's sort of, the end all be all, but I'm a fan of Alan Moore's. And I think if you read his work, you'll see lots of signs of research. Again, I had just read his writing book and he talks about the research he did for Swamp Thing. And it is incredible. There's one branch that is like science and biology of local plant life to Louisiana. There's geography and history. And he's looking at maps, and it's just this real immersion in the research. And so much comes out, you just don't know what you don't know. It's even impossible to ask those questions. I can't imagine I don't know what I would do that wouldn't require some level of research. And, I don't know why I would spend my time doing something that I wasn't sort of at least interested in, on some level to get me started down that path. So I don't know. I think probably most artists, most writers do tend to do research because you kind of have to. Unless you're just doing auto-bio about your life, which some people have done great comics with, you probably need to do some research. Making comics is super time consuming. So it's not like most of us have some other life experience we can draw on. If we want to know about how anything is done, we probably need to look it up.
I just imagine Alan Moore in the bayou with a pork pie hat, just asking questions about flatworms, yes, but how are they in the natural habitat is all I'm trying to figure out.
So you mentioned
great Alan Moore.
Oh, thank you.
Oh, he's got plenty of them. Just name a creator or something.
Yeah, no.
He's got them. But so you talked a little bit about the complexities of making Octobriana and incorporating the blacklight process. Is there a particular panel or page that maybe you're most proud of because it posed a challenge or it just turned out really well?
There's a panel that it's following like an explosion and it's kind of a 3-dimensional 3D art. That was a very hard page to put together, technically. I don't know that it's not my favorite page probably, but that was the toughest page technically to put together just because I had a lot of layers of art and color that needed to register right. I hate to get too dry on this. It's not the most exciting page, but technically that was a tough one. I don't know, I'm pretty happy with how the book came out as a whole. So I don't know that one stands out above any of the others. I like the first, I like the scene when we first see Robot Stalin, it shifts color palettes, but it's still the neon fluorescent colors. I think he looks really cool. There's a little bit of a reference to Dr. Strangelove, kind of like, war room.
Gentlemen, please, no fighting in the war room.
Yes. So, as a fan of that, it was kind of cool to put that in. But, I have a lot of those. If you were just picking my brain, the book's kind of full of Easter eggs for things I like and, little nods to this artist or that artist or some movie or comic. So I'm pretty happy overall with how it came out. But those first several pages I had done, if you saw the process zine, I did, I think 6 or so pages and then I sent it off to AdHouse Books as a proposal. I really don't, when I started this, I wasn't sure it would work. I wasn't sure how it would work. So getting the first several pages done was really big personally because it was okay, this works. I like how it looks. I'm pretty confident this will print right. So it was kind of in the beginning, just who knows, let's see how it goes and get a couple pages done. And once I had those, I felt pretty good, but I kind of viewed them as a unit.
The origin and backstory of Octobriana, representing a spirit of opposition to fascism, is an interesting one for sure. And it's something that you do a remarkable job of introducing to readers, not only in your process zine, but also the comic itself. And I'm specifically talking about that last page where you kind of, you have the different text boxes and things like that. What was the most interesting or inspiring piece of information you learned when doing your research into her origin? And do you think the message of resistance that originally birthed Octobriana is relevant in any way today, considering our own, country's like political atmosphere?
Here we go.
And man, sometimes I wish it was less relevant politically. It does feel like it's very relevant today politically, unfortunately.
Pour your drinks, kids.
Yeah. The thing that came up in the research, and this would be the opposite of what was great about it, is that it's a hoax, right? It's not real. Like the author wrote this amazing book about this character, positioned it like it was a historical thing, and it isn't. And when you get into the real story, he stole that art from a couple of artists in Czechoslovakia and then like left the country with it and published it under, without giving those guys any credit at all. And so it's terrible, but also in a way that's comics history in America, even though this happened outside of America. And I thought it was kind of interesting that like, here's this superhero that's, created in the 60s, echoes of Marvel Universe or something. And here are the creators being exploited, even though it's behind the Iron Curtain. They really were behind the Iron Curtain. Like that's what he fled from. That part was true. But it's like the exploitation happened in communism the same way it happened here in capitalism. And it's like, that's not a great, that wasn't one of the good things that I learned in research, but it was one of those things that was like, that's kind of interesting that those parallels existed in both, behind both sides of the Iron Curtain.
So I'm sure the coincidence isn't lost on you, of all people, that you not only had an extremely successful Kickstarter campaign, but you had a matching 1976 backers for Octobriana 1976, which I was like, man, you can't make this stuff up.
No, that's magic. That's Grant Morrison, Alan Moore kind of magic right there.
Yo, chaos magic, represent. Yes.
Oh, man. With everything said and done.
I did do a sigil that morning. I'm just saying. I'm just saying.
C gets like 0.001 credit. But with everything said and done, how is your overall experience with Kickstarter? And do you think that you'll leverage it in the future for other projects?
Probably. It was a great experience. And one of the things, like, it was a lot of work. I did everything myself. There are things I would do differently. If I did another one, I would probably not pack everything myself. But I did everything myself, so I kind of got a pretty good look at it in the process. And I found it to be, like you said, it was successful, but it also went pretty smooth. I did a lot of planning. Kickstarter has like a guide on their homepage. I think it's about 9 pages long, but everything's like linked out. So if you have questions, you don't even have to search for them. They're just links there. And regardless of like what publisher I'd work with in the future, I'll probably go through the Kickstarter guide because it was so thorough in like planning. It kind of laid out everything you should do to set up PR and your release times and everything. And so I found that part really, really helpful. And I followed it as closely as I could. It took a lot of pre-planning, which is not my strong suit, but I did it. And, I think that's why it did kind of go off pretty smoothly. And afterwards, I'm still in some ways recovering and, it's been a while now. All the rewards are sent and everything, but I still kind of sit around and think about it. And one of my takeaways is I feel like I could do essentially whatever I want to do next. Because this is a path that I think I could use again. And I think I could use it in a lot of different ways. Like sometimes I think about doing like a history book on 80s black and white comics. I think this would be an avenue if I wanted to do it myself, as opposed to working with a publisher, or if I wanted to do it as a series of zines or something like that. I've been wanting to do a crowdfunding thing forever because I'm interested in things like distribution. I do a lot of my own work, from like making zines to, making posters and things like that. And so distribution is always something I think about. It's often part of my process. And that's why I wanted to try a crowdfunder to see kind of like, all right, what's this look like? Octobriana fit really well, like it kind of lined up as being a good fit for Kickstarter, but it really opened my eyes to the idea of you could design a project around this from the ground up. I probably will again. I'm not sure what I'm doing next, to be quite honest. I have irons in different fires.
Okay.
But I'm not positive exactly what I'm going to do next, but certainly, my experience, I would do another Kickstarter if I had a project that I thought fit that.
Have you supported other creators on Kickstarter prior to this? And did you have like any hesitance going into Kickstarter? Like, did you have any worries or things that like maybe made you a little hesitant in pursuing it?
I have backed other Kickstarters, both comics and some other projects. My biggest hesitancy was just the unknown, and trying to get things like shipping right. I've heard a lot of stories about shipping gone wrong. I had a friend do a Kickstarter, and I think they ended up doing something like $44,000 of shipping or something like that. So, of course, that person's in my ear telling me about, make sure your shipping is right.
Yeah.
So like I had all those normal things. We didn't print the book until after the Kickstarter ended. So, that was always in my head of like, making sure the printing went right, because again, it is kind of strange. Maybe there's a reason there aren't other blacklight comic books. So I had the normal things that I would be concerned about, just with the pressure of like, because it's done after Kickstarter, it's like, well, if something does go wrong in printing, I have to solve that. It's not like if you're doing a comic book and you're printing it and sending it out to stores, if it prints wrong, the worst is you might have to eat that cost, but you could maybe cut your losses at some point. With money in hand, it's like I owe people a bunch of this stuff, so I need to make sure this works. So, I tend to be neurotic. I think a lot of cartoonists are neurotic, and I had my normal, things that I was worried about like that. But like I said, it went pretty smooth. Like once it launched, things go very fast. So then it's like a big list of what I'm expecting and things I still need to do. And I kept busy through the whole process. So it kind of raced by. Nothing bad happened in that race. And so I didn't have a lot of time to worry once the thing launched.
So another hard question here, Jim. When you're working on projects, what is your favorite music to listen to, and why is it the soundtrack to Shaft?
That's a leading question, sir.
I couldn't help myself. I'm sorry.
It's pretty good. When I did Aphrodisiac, I ended up with soundtracks to like all those movies, and I still have those. But I don't listen to a lot of music. I mostly listen to podcasts whenever I'm working.
Sure.
I can't really tell you why that is. I didn't really grow up with music, and so it's not been a big part of my life.
Yeah, that's cool.
Speaking about like influences and growing up and things like that, I read in a Wizard fanzine that your first published work was a Ashcan comic called Tar Pit. You released it in high school. And I was curious, what's been the most valuable lesson or memory you've had going from being a fan of comics and, it being a hobby to becoming a seasoned professional?
I don't know about one lesson. I like making my own stuff. Like that's something that I took from the very beginning of making those mini comics. And then whenever I started, the first books I did, I offset printed. And that meant doing like 1,000 or doing 2,000. And let me tell you, there was no market for my first comics.
Yeah.
But I didn't know any better, And so I went to SPX, the Small Press Expo was my second show, and it was full of mini comics. And I mean like beautiful stuff. People were doing like silk screen covers, and fold outs and all the stuff you could do whenever you're hand making 25 copies or 50 or 100 copies. And I came home with boxes of these things that were like literally some of the most beautiful comics I had ever seen, but they were also feasible for me to make. So you know what? Probably the lesson for me is like use the stuff that you have access to, because now like you can draw with anything. You can draw in any size. You can reproduce stuff. You could reproduce it at the office store down the street or, wherever. You probably do it on your printer at home. Like do that. There's no secret tool. There's no, you don't have to spend a bunch of money to make this stuff. So like, that's probably the lesson that I take away. If I have a piece of software, use that piece of software. If there's a drawing tool I like that I have, use that. It's not like you have to invest in a bunch of money up front, which I learned the hard way by buying thousands of comics that nobody wanted. So you can do this stuff now with whatever's available. Like, self-published online, it doesn't cost anything and you could have 10 million readers. So, that's probably the thing that I would take away is there's just no shortcut. There's no magic tool. It's just use what you have and go for it. No excuses. but also don't be stupid. You don't need to buy like $2,000 piece of something in order to do this.
I've already messed up then.
I was like, secretly hides everything.
So, Jim, I think it's safe to say that you are a battle-scarred vet when it comes to the convention circuit, and not just nationally. I know that you also attend international comic conventions and comic shows as well. How has COVID and this whole pandemic made you pivot, business-wise currently and maybe for like future comic book related work? I mean, has it really made you have to rethink things and think long-term?
Octobriana was a result of the pivot. Like I was planning, I had 2 books come out, one in January and one in November. Street Angel, Deadly Squirrel Alive was my image collection, came out in November. I'm super proud of that. And then Plain Jane's, like the 500-page, collection came out in January. I had more shows scheduled this year than I've ever scheduled.
Wow.
Like I was planning to sell those books in person. And, the idea was Octobriana was going to be the surprise book at all these shows. And then at the end of the season, we would run it through Diamond. And that way people would know about it. There'd be word of mouth of like, there's this wild looking, colorful book. Oh, now you can get it in comic book shops, because it's hard to sell indie books, to shops. So that was the plan. It's like, I'm going to sell books. I'm going to promote the book, and then I'll sell them again in the fall. I finished the book right as everything shut down. Even the printer we were going to use shut down. The shows that I was going to be guest at, like one after another, kept canceling. And it's like, okay, what do I do? And, Kickstarter crowdfunding was an option because I had a finished book. I did not expect to be able to, take that out anytime soon. Like once things started closing, it was pretty clear it was going to be shut down for a while. And, that was the big pivot. I do a YouTube show, so we've continued to lean into that in terms of, keeping my work and myself kind of out in the ether. But otherwise, I'm not sure long term what this is going to do or how it will affect me. I think the crowdfunding is one more option in terms of publishing and distribution. It's something I will certainly weigh, like whatever books I do in the future, that'll be an option that publishers I will consider, the publishers against the idea of doing it myself, through a crowdfunder. So that's probably the biggest pivot, is just, thinking of one more way of like, how do you get this work into your readers' hands?
Can I just say, sorry, Street Angel is so damn charming. It's so good. Like and Botter can attest that it is a chore and an uphill battle for me to get into new stuff or stuff that I've never really
exposed. Jim, it's like pulling teeth. My good God.
Not in front of Jim.
We do a comic book podcast.
But I was reading it and like, don't laugh. I was reading it and there were parts where like, I'm like, okay, this is cool. I like this. Oh, that's a funny part. That's cute. And then it's like, out of nowhere, like a left, like hooked, and it's like emotion, and it hits you with sort of like some of the tragic elements. I'm like, oh my God, like I'm getting choked up here, And I work and I'm in the military, so I'm sitting here and I'm looking around, I'm reading this comic, and everybody's looking at me like, what's up with this guy? Is he okay? We're all in uniform. I'm like, I'm fine. I'm fine. I'll be okay. Street Angel just found the cutest dog. Just leave me alone. So yeah, I just wanted to chime in and say, man, that's awesome. It's good.
That's amazing. That's great to hear. Thank you.
Yeah.
I sometimes think I try really hard to make comics that are readable, which sounds obvious, but it isn't. Like there's lots of comics that I love to look at, but like if I handed them to somebody that doesn't read comics, they would have no idea. What do I read first? What do I read next? And so I try really hard to make my comics readable. And, with Street Angel, like that's probably the most readable thing I do. It's designed to be, it could be somebody's first comic, easy to read, I just want people to open the cover and give it a chance. There's still a lot of room to be playful and do some really cool dynamic stuff, but I want it to be readable more than anything else. So I'm glad to hear you say that, and thank you for giving it a chance. I think a lot of people could find a lot of great comics if they were a little bit more open to that.
There are a lot of guys at work that I was like, look, and they read, and I mean, it's no shocker to anyone that's in the military or has any history of comics that comics in the military have they're bedfellows. I mean, as far as morale is concerned and keeping troops of any branch entertained historically, absolutely. So it should be of no surprise that within our own shop, we have a few comic book heads, and it was not lost upon me to be like, guys, get your asses on this freaking dude. Like, freaking Street Angel is the truth, please. And then like what, wait, man. you can't just tell it. We're on lunch, bro. What's the matter with you? Like, you I was stark raving mad. I was like Rorschach before anybody knew who he was in Watchmen. Like, I had the placard, and I was like, the end is nigh. Read this book. She's a ninja, and she's also homeless. What's the matter with you?
You know, I'll go ahead and shoehorn in a shameless shout out, and only because it applies to Street Angel, I want to shout out one of our listeners, Austin Wade Ellis, man, Wade, for introducing me to your body of work through Street Angel.
Cool.
I remember that was one of the things he championed, and he's always checking out obscure underground indie comic books. And, he might have been responsible for getting me onto Cartoonist Kayfabe, but I remember him bringing Street Angel to my attention. He was like, yo, man, if you ain't reading this, you messing up. So I want to shout out Wade. Jim, you mentioned...
Thanks, Wade.
Shout out to Wade, man.
Thank you, Austin.
So, Jim, you had mentioned how kind of difficult it is for, indie comic books to make its way to local comic shops. Well, I wanted to share my excitement when I walked into my local comic shop, shameless plug, Gotham City Limit,
nice.
And they had a copy of Octobriana, and I lost my, I just lost my shit. I was like, Ben, what are you doing with this? Like, how did you get this? And
he's like, I learned it from watching you.
Yeah. But, and I kind of forgot how I think it went through Diamond, and it just really caught his attention. And, he was like, yo, it's a blacklight comic book. And I was like, yeah, let me show you. Let me turn off all the lights in here. But I wanted to ask, how has the reception been from comic shops that have been able to stock this book in their shops?
From what I can tell, it's been great. We did a promotion where we sent 500 copies. We sent copies for free to 500 shops before the book was available, for order, to kind of let them know what it looks like, to have it in their hands. And the orders were big. They were bigger than we expected. So, I think the response has been good. And I have heard anecdotally about places selling out and reordering. So, I think the response has been really strong. It's one of the things that I hopefully helps the shops is it's a one shot. Mike Mignola had done a book years ago called Amazing Screw on Head.
Oh, yeah.
It always left a mark with me because it was like one comic, you read it, it's satisfying. I'm such a fan of that, especially with indie books. They're hard to track down. So it's like this, I tried to make a book where it's like, put it by your counter, sell it to the person who likes, whatever the cool art book is, sell it to the person who's trying to get their friend hooked on comics. There's a lot of avenues to kind of, I think, put that in somebody's hands. And we tried to make the stores, aware of that. And I only know from online and feedback from, a handful of stores. And I guess people that pick them up at stores will post and tag me. But it seems like it's worked really well. It has, like I said, it's sold better than I expected, which is awesome. So thanks to the comic shops who maybe got that free issue, took a look at it and ordered some.
Cool.
It's going well. We are nearing sellout at the publisher level. And the nature of the book is, I don't know if we'll reprint it. Like I said, it's not the easiest book to make. So we'll see. But in terms of sales, I thought we way overprinted and we're getting near the end on our side. So it's gone well, thanks to the shops. I really appreciate it.
So let me go ahead and translate what Jim Rugg just said for some of you out there. You better go ahead and pre-order right now.
Yeah,
go pick it up where you can. I got one more kind of Octobriana related question, and then I want to kind of get into Cartoonist Kayfabe, and Cesar is chomping at the bits to talk like super nerdy comic book talk. But I was, with Octobriana being a public domain character, are there any other public domain characters that would garner your interest to create an original story?
I'd have to see a list of public domain characters.
Nice.
Off the top of my head, I just don't know. I remember like Black Terror, I think is a public domain character that I always thought had a cool costume, but that's probably not enough for me to
great
go
costume.
that direction. I don't know off the top of my head. I'd have to investigate that a little bit more. See what's out there.
Fair
I'm
enough,
sure
yeah.
there are probably some great characters that are out there, and you can get into like fables and fairy tales and stuff. A lot of that stuff would be public domain characters. So.
Fair enough.
I don't know. Maybe.
Are you familiar with Ralph Bakshi and Mighty Mouse?
I think I am.
So essentially, Ralph Bakshi secured. He said he had the rights to Mighty Mouse before he actually owned the rights to Mighty Mouse. So it's like, I'm working on Mighty Mouse right now. It's like, all right, fine, we'll give you money, make your new cartoon, Ralph. And he goes out and he finds an animator, and he's like, somebody find out how much Mighty Mouse is. Oh my god! I just said we were doing a cartoon. Somebody buy the rights quick.
That's amazing. I have not heard that. That's a great story.
That sounds like the origin of this podcast. Yeah. Will you do an interview for my podcast? Sure. See, we need to make a podcast right now.
Right now.
All right. So, Jim, I noticed in your Octobriana processing that you mentioned how Richard Corbin's comic book art, his artwork has left an impression on you due to his artwork having a very psychedelic effect. And I think it's very apparent when you read Octobriana to see that influence. Well, last week, you and Ed also dropped a cartoonist kayfabe video examining his artwork on Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles number 33 from Rugg Studios from 1984.
Nice.
And then this week, we also got the announcement that you did a TMNT Blacklight poster in collaboration with I Am Bit, along with Nickelodeon. And I wanted to know, can you expand for our audience your personal admiration for the Turtles on the Half Shell and their creators Eastman and Laird?
Well, sure. I was a kid whenever the Turtles were huge. Movies, cartoons, like everybody probably that's out there. I feel like they've been around now for multiple generations. But I started looking into, comics. I was a comics fan first. And as soon as I found comic book shops, once I got access to a comic book shop, I found the black and white Turtles comics. I didn't know that. I didn't know, I knew the after school cartoon and the, kind of the sort of silly movies, but I hadn't seen the black and white comics. And when I got hold of those, Frank Miller was like my favorite guy in those early comics. They're right out of Ronin,
right.
Frank Miller's Ronin. And so I got hold of those and I loved them. And then I started to learn about creator rights, like through Image Comics guys. And that led me back to Eastman and Laird and the Turtles. And so you put those two things together, and the black and white was a big thing for me because I was just drawing. That's what my drawings looked like. I had no idea how to color stuff. There's no Photoshop. I didn't have a computer. It didn't even exist back then. So I was just doing black and white drawings in my sketchbook. And when I saw comics like the original Turtles that were black and white, it was like, oh man, you could do this. This comic's super cool. These guys own this, and they've made they've made a mint off of it. This is the template. This is, this was the dream. So it was both the comics that I found really cool because I knew the Turtles as kind of these kid friendly kind of, characters they were great. They're ninjas. Who doesn't like that?
Sure.
But when I saw the black and white, more adult, violent version, man, that was right up my alley. It was speaking to me, and it had a raw quality, which really helped. Those comics weren't perfect. You would look at them and it was warts and all. It really was inspiring because it felt like you could do this.
Yeah.
And so that really led me into indie comics. At that point, I just started looking for more. And, that was post black and white. This would have been, when I found them, it would have been late 80s, early 90s. Yeah. And so there was all this stuff from the 80s black and white boom was around. And it just led me into that. And, there's a lot of great comics and great art that came out of that. Things like James O'Barr's Crow, probably I found shortly after that.
Oh, wow.
But it was just loaded with a whole new world of comics. And a lot of my comics reading have followed that pattern. I'll get into something like black and white comics from the 80s. I'll do that for a couple of years. I'll kind of get to the point where it's hard for me to find new stuff or whatever, or I'm just tired of looking at that. And then I pivot to something new. And it's one of the great things with comics is I start reading manga. Guess what? There are shelves and shelves of that I can, get lost in and spend years looking at and studying and learning the different artists that I like and following them around. So, Turtles in a lot of ways, they were one of my first transitions into there are comic book shops. They have boxes of this stuff.
Nice.
Go find this, find more of it, see what's advertised in them, what's listed in the letters pages. And, kind of, like I said, that's basically been my reading habits ever since. So the Turtles they were huge. They were inspiration as cartoonists. They were inspirations as businessmen. And they were inspirations as start digging through comics history.
One of the things that C pulled me to the side right before, we hopped on this call was,
oh God, is this going to embarrass me?
He was like, hey man, warning, I'm about to geek out over some Richard Corbin with Jim.
Oh yeah. Well, so one of my favorite movies, speaking of gateway drugs, as far as cool stuff is concerned, one of my favorite movies growing up was Heavy Metal. And of course the Den story in the movie, I didn't know it was based off of a comic, much less, who Richard Corbin was. And then once I did find out, it was just love at first sight. So I was going to ask, did you ever get into his Heavy Metal catalog, or even the stuff he did with Marvel was pretty legit. I think he worked on some Ghost Rider stuff that was chef's kiss good, This is delicious.
He did 2 issues of Ghost Rider that are awesome.
Yeah.
He did The Punisher at the end, pretty good. He did the Banner Hulk 4-issue miniseries. Awesome. He did Luke Cage 5 issues.
Sir.
Really great.
Yes, sir.
So, yeah, I like pretty much every Corbin stuff that I have come across. And he's so prolific. By the way, the day we're recording this, happy 80th birthday, Richard Corbin. Like, the guy's a treasure in comics as far as I'm concerned. Botter, you mentioned going to like international comics festivals. The first time I went to France, it was Angoulême, the giant, French giant European convention. And Richard Corbin was one of the 2 artists that were spotlighted, which meant he had like half a museum full of Richard Corbin art that we just walked through every time we had, 10 minutes free time.
So
it was
cool.
like run to the Richard Corbin exhibit and just look at stuff. He's incredible. Like from a visual standpoint, there's still nobody that does stuff like him. He was doing things, again, not to get too technical, but like he would paint on color separations in order to do like gradations and things that like you really couldn't do. So he'd be airbrushing on color separations, an artist, even though he has gained popularity, usually that term is reserved for somebody that isn't as popular, but we really think they're good.
Sure.
He's both. I think everybody loves his work and I think they should. He's extremely original. The sad part is if you go, I love Richard Corbin, it's like, what else should I look at? Look at more Richard Corbin because there isn't anything else like this guy.
It's true. It's true. I'm still trying to save up for the Creepy Archives hardback collection that he has. And it's like, I looked at it and I was like, ooh. And then my wife saw me looking at it and she was like, not yet. Not. We don't have that kind of money yet because it's so rare. Like I should have jumped on it as soon as I saw it at a comic book shop.
Oh, I didn't realize. Is it out of print?
I don't know if it's out of print, but it's hard to get a hold of outside of a shop. Ooh. If you're online, it'll cost you a little bit. I don't mind spending the money. But you
just can't get in trouble.
I just got to be real. Look,
it's a heck of a book, man. There's a few of those collections that Dark Horse has done. I think there's a Bernie Wrights and Steve Ditko, the Alex Toth.
I've got
the
it.
Toth one I'd highly recommend.
Solid.
Too. That's a pretty cheap, big collection of Toth. But the Corbin one, I think, might be the biggest of all of those. So it's a lot of his artwork.
Sense.
There's color and black and white. Like that's a nice collection. I'm not at all tired of looking at his work. I talk about going through phases where I look at stuff and then I want to see something else. I haven't reached that point with his work. And you mentioned Den. One of the things that I hope to do on Cartoonist Kayfabe is cover his self-publishing efforts. Because in the 80s, he starts self-publishing. And in the letters column, he mentions part of it is because of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles' success and seeing like the self-publishing model. Huh. And so he self-published for several years and a number of comics and books. And they're phenomenal, like in terms of production quality. One was 10 issues of Den in full color that are absolutely beautiful, which is pretty amazing for the middle of the 80s and to be doing it yourself.
Right.
But yeah, I think the world of his art.
What's your favorite if you had to pick?
Oh man.
Top 3. They'll make it easy.
I'm biased. It's personal bias stuff, but
sure.
I like his Cage work a lot. Because that came out probably around the time I was working on Aphrodisiac. So like I'm looking at everything.
Course.
I'm looking at Luke Cage, old comics. And so when that popped up, it was like, man, that's beautiful work. And it's mostly his pen and ink work. I don't know who colors it, but it's not like, his airbrushed or painted work. I'm going to cheat a little bit and say that Creepy Archive is probably number 2 because it's everything.
It's not cheating.
Everything is in there.
And rub some salt on Cesar's wounds at the same time.
and my third one's going to be the Hellboy with the wrestling, with the Mexican wrestlers.
Good shit.
Because, it's wrestling, it's Hellboy, it's Corbin, like
Camasats. Yeah, it's good.
So speaking of TMNT, I did briefly mention the Blacklight poster that was announced via I Am 8-Bit and Nickelodeon. How did that opportunity come up for you?
I've been working with I Am 8-Bit for a long time. They have a gallery space in LA. They've done art shows of mine. I do like these ballpoint pen on notebook paper drawings, and they've done shows of those that have gone pretty well. So we've actually done a couple of those. But they also have like, I don't know how they would describe themselves, but they do promotion for different things. So like I've done commercial work with them, things like I did an album design for Tron, the video game soundtrack, whenever the second Tron movie came out.
Nice.
I'm trying to think of what else I've done. I've done a bunch of work with them because I've been working with them probably for 10 to 15 years. Like as long as they've been around, I've been doing stuff with them. They've published some comics. So like we have these overlapping interests. They're into video games, comics, illustration, all the things that I like, they're into. And so we just met up pretty early on. And I can't even remember how we connected initially, but we've been doing things on and off for years. And they ask, sometimes projects will come up or they'll get a license for something and they'll ask me if I'm interested in it. And I love the turtles. And so that's what happened. You know, they said they were going to do a series of posters, and would I be interested in doing one? And it's like, yeah, I'll be very interested in doing one. And then, you know, it's really cool. They gave me a lot of flexibility in like what I wanted to do. And I proposed the blacklight idea and they jumped on it right away. So yeah, it kind of, you know, I guess we have a long history together is, you know, I don't know exactly where it started, but we've been working together for years. So.
And no surprise to anyone listening that's familiar with Jim Rugg's work. It is a gorgeous looking poster.
Oh, dude. Yeah, flawless.
Yeah, absolutely great looking. And this episode should be released on the 9th, and I believe pre-orders for said posters end on, is it the 13th of this month?
The 13th, yeah. And that's it. Like at that point, they close it down and they print that number of posters. So if somebody wants one, it is a very limited window, and that'll be all that's made. And I'll say this, thank you for saying it looks good. It will look, you know, 100 times better in person. Like these fluorescent inks, you can't represent them on screen. And part of the reason I'm so excited for it is this is a printer that I've worked with before. I know they're an amazing printer. And I talked to them about some of the inks. Like we're going to use a green ink that I've never used before that will look like the ooze that gave the turtles their power. Like you're going to be able to see this stuff from the moon. Like it is going to be the brightest green. You know, that was what we were fishing for. Like I was talking to them and it was like, it's got to be radioactive, this green. You know, that's the whole thing with the turtles and the logos like that. I think it's going to look stunning, the actual print.
Yeah. So here's some easy math for anyone listening. Jim Rugg plus anything blacklight plus TMNT equals quick sellout. So, you know, get your pre-orders
on it. Yeah.
ASAP. Jim, so our show here at the Short Box for the last 8 years, we've specifically focused on comic reviews, recommendations, and in interviews like this one. We try our best to cater to comic book gurus and novices entering the genre. I've always appreciated Cartoonist Kayfabe's unabashed love and focus on interesting, obscure, underground, and indie comics. Yeah. And I got to know, what has been some of your favorite episodes or interviews that you and Ed have done on the channel?
Oh, man. We talked to Steve Bissette for like 4.5 hours one day.
Wow.
I love Steve Bissette. He was a guy early on that influenced me. Besides being amazing on Swamp Thing and
I was going to say,
comics, he did, whenever I was, you know, coming up, he did Tyrant, a T-Rex self-published black and white book. And I would show my art teachers comics and they were always dismissive. Like, that's really not good art. And when I showed them Tyrant, my art teacher was like, that's something. That's really good. And then I got to meet him through various different places and he was just always great. So I'm a big fan of Steve Bissette's. It was awesome to get to kind of like have him come on and show him off. I really enjoyed talking to Mark Miller, someone whose work I wouldn't necessarily, it's not really the stuff that I read a lot of. You know, I was kind of phased out of Marvel by the time he was doing Ultimates and some of that stuff. I've read some of his creator-owned work, but it seems like he's a different sort of creator than me in terms of his sensibility. And I had a great time talking with him. And you realize like it's storytelling, you know, like getting to talk to him, talk shop, talk about the comics that he was into. I really enjoyed that conversation. And, you know, sometimes it's because it's a surprise, you know, you're never sure what you're going to get. We talked to Dave Gibbons early on. And
that was a good one.
Dave
Yeah, that was
Gibbons,
a good one.
you know, and he was awesome. I don't know if we've had a bad experience in terms of talking to, you know, the cartoonists that we have. And it's been a pretty interesting range of people. You know, we talked to, like some of these guys we've known for a while. We talked to Howard Chaykin and that's great. We've known him for a while. We knew he'd be great cool. Talker, amazing career. We talked to Brendan McCarthy, and Brendan McCarthy, he was one of the first British like artist comic writer guys to come to the States and do stuff. He was doing stuff at Pacific Comics in the early 80s, you know, kind of before the British invasion that we think of all the Vertigo guys. And I knew his work from that. My friends knew his work because his stuff looks like nothing else. Like it's another one like a Corbin where like you would think this unique artist that shows up, a bunch of people would copy him. I don't think you can copy him. You know, he's a phenomenal artist. And so we got a chance to talk to him, and he's had a fantastic career of doing all sorts of stuff, Marvel, DC included, but also a lot of this creator-owned stuff that's just out there. And like one of his big things is he co-wrote Fury Road, Mad Max Fury Road with George Miller.
Oh, wow.
And they wrote that whole movie through storyboards, most of which Brendan McCarthy was the guy storyboarding it. And so it was just really cool to talk to him. In my mind, he's this giant, but then he doesn't have, a giant hit in comics necessarily, even though he has an incredible body of work that I would encourage everybody to track down. There've been some big, nice collections of his comics from Dark Horse and some of these publishers, but he's a guy that's big on my list. And I don't know if I've seen interviews with him. One of the first interviews we did, speaking of people I don't see a lot of interviews with, one of the first people we sat down with was Tim Vigil. Tim Vigil is the outlaw godfather of comics. He did Faust. Faust was one of those black and white comics I got hold of when I found comic book stores. Way too young to have Faust. But in the old days, comic book shops would just, whatever.
Here, kid, just take it.
yeah, really. And thank you to the comic shop owner that put that in my hand or let me walk out with it. But we sat down with him at Heroes Con a couple years ago, and I wasn't sure what to expect because I really didn't know of any interviews with him. So it was really cool to get him on record and just to have a chance to hear him talk about his career and history, because that's a guy who's been in comics since the 80s, has a big body of work, but it's not well chronicled. And so that was really exciting. I remember coming out of that and I felt like electricity, coursing, it was just exciting because I wasn't sure what to expect and it turned out well.
I think some of my favorite ones that kind of come immediately to mind, definitely the Todd McFarlane episode, because I think it was shortly either before or after we did our own kind of artist spotlight on Todd McFarlane. Yeah. So it was fun to have you guys and watch you guys interview him, as well as the Rob Liefeld. And I think the Chris Claremont too was mind blowing as well. And in addition to some of those names I mentioned and the ones that you've mentioned, I'm curious when it comes to securing these interviews, how often is it you guys reaching out, or is there normally an existing relationship, or have you guys ever had the opposite happen where you guys are approached for, hey, I would love to, I'm a fan of the show, I'd love to, sit down with you guys?
We've had all those scenarios happen. We don't have a very good formula, which I don't know if that's good or bad, but it's everything you've described has happened. Sometimes it's a friend of a friend. Sometimes it is somebody reaching out. Sometimes it's us reaching out, sometimes one of us is friends with the person. So it kind of goes, whatever we can come up with and makes sense for everybody schedule wise or, whatever works.
I'm sure it's, definitely emphasis on the oldest, piece of knowledge I hear a lot when it comes to the comic book industry is network as much as you can, because you never know when, the opportunity arises to leverage said networks or relationships.
True.
That's probably good advice. I'm really bad at networking. I tend to have a very small group that I'm close to, and that's about it. But I do these shows, so inevitably, you get on panels or you bump into each other, and if you do it long enough, everybody kind of knows each other because comics have been pretty small over the years. I think the industry is growing, hopefully, but when I started, man, it was tiny. In 2000, Marvel was still sort of coming out of bankruptcy. It was before Free Comic Book Day had started to happen. I think that's been a real positive, but it was small. So I think, I don't know, there were 75 people making comics in 2000. So, you get to know each other at the same shows.
So this next question probably deserves its own episode, especially considering, the person that we're talking with today. But what's a comic recommendation that you would give to a novice comic collector / reader who wants to expand their palette outside of the more popular mainstream comics? Is there any go-to ones that you whether it's something you give your students or someone that's only maybe read the big two and they really want to kind of get into the more obscure titles? What are some recommendations that come to mind?
Well, I might ask them normally what they're interested in and try to point them at something, that makes sense with that. However, you caught me at a very particular time.
Yes.
I spent 2 nights ago, I sat up reading into the middle of the night because I had gotten hooked on this book called The Eternaut. It came out a few years ago from Fantagraphics. It's a science fiction book. It's a science fiction book that was created in the late 50s in Argentina by this writer, Hector German Osterheld. And the artist is Francisco Solano Lopez. And they serialized it weekly over 3 years. And the reason the timing is interesting is because Marvel was doing monster comics at the time, which are awesome. And I love those. This is kind of a monster comic. It's about an alien invasion and the humans that are trying to survive through this alien invasion. And it's an epic. It's absolutely stunning. I was transfixed reading it.
Wow.
I don't know the last time I've stayed up like several hours into the night reading a comic. Literally, I don't know the last time it happened. It might be 10 years. It happened on Tuesday. So this thing blew my mind. I can't explain how impressed I am by it. And it's very easy to read. It's, like 3 tiers per page. So if you handed it to somebody that's not familiar with comics, I think they'd have no problem reading it and keeping up with it. The art looks great. It's very clear. And it's just very human. Like it starts out at this guy with his house and his family. This thing happens and then you're following him. So in the beginning, you don't even know what's going on. I always feel bad saying it's an alien invasion story because it kind of gives a little bit away, but that doesn't happen, on page 300. You figure it out pretty early, but you still have this very limited knowledge. In some ways, it resembles like a typical zombie story where it's like a very small group of humans facing impossible odds and just trying to, keep moving forward and stay alive. But it is extremely human. It's gripping. It makes sense whenever they think about what do we do next. Their answers usually make sense. Like I could imagine if I was there, this is what I would do too. Or if this guy suggested it, I'd be, yep, let's do that. That makes sense. So, it really kind of holds you in for that reason. It's very easy to empathize with the characters and to kind of agree with what they're doing in the face of a really bad situation. I found it compelling and amazing. It's been through 3 printings. I think Fantagraphics published it in 2016. It's already gone through 3 printings. So people that are finding it enjoy it. It keeps selling out. And it's beautiful. It's a beautiful package, well designed, but it is an incredible story.
I had to pick my job. Me and Steve was
I know,
like,
I
over
was
here
like-
looking foolish.
I was like,
yeah,
oh,
what?
okay, yeah, sure.
This is
sure.
the Bible? Speaking about cartoonist kayfabe, I will say one of my favorite purchases this year has been a fanzine that pays homage to the old Wizard comic magazine as well as cartoonist kayfabe. It's called Wizard the Comics Magazine. It's with an X. Shout outs to Eli Schwab and the whole Cosmic Lion team. What are your thoughts on the community that you guys have built through not only your own projects and cartoonist kayfabe? I mean, was fostering this massive loyal community of hardcore comic book fans a purposeful goal when you guys started cartoonist kayfabe back in 2018?
Not really. It never occurred to me that might happen. Yeah. I was mostly concerned with the technical side of like, how do we make something and put on YouTube and it sounds okay? That group that grew up around it, like I love that Wizard zine. I love zines. That Wizard zine is one of the most impressive zines that I've ever seen. So, tip of the hat to those guys. I think they did tremendous. But that was just kind of this cool accident. But the great part is like when I found comic shops, one of the most awesome thing was I was the only guy I knew that really read comics. So when I found comic shops, the best thing ever was being able to have a conversation about whatever comic I was excited about or hearing them like, try this or I read that one you like and I agree it's great. And now, this is the other thing that guy did. Like all of those conversations, that community in the comic shop, I just loved it. And it changed over the years. I usually think like the example I use is in the 90s, there might be like 5 books in a year that everybody could kind of agree these were the best 5 comics that came out this year. Now it's like, I don't think you could have a consensus in 1 week. And also there's so much good stuff coming out, whether it's, imports, reprints, new things, graphic novels. There's so much good work. We don't all read the same stuff and not at the same time. So like a lot of the community and the conversations that used to happen at those comic shops, I don't get those anymore. That's a lot of what Ed and I have, like we get to talk about comics together and I love it. And I think other people loved it too, and I think that's where that community's come out of. And so, I hear back from them. Sometimes if I have a question or I'm looking for something, they'll have those answers. It's really awesome. But it was just, I don't know, unintended consequences that group showed up. But I think they're inspired by the same stuff I'm inspired by. It's just like, I love comics. Let's talk about comics, like show off what we think's good or we've found lately. And, it's great. Like that enthusiasm is the part I want more of that in comics. I've had that kind of ebb and flow, and it's awesome if I can do something to kind of keep it in that, that rising tide, that we can all experience. And I think that group, they do the same thing. It's great to hear from them too, because we hear a lot about people that are like, I draw when I listen to the show. Mm-hmm. It's like, that's awesome. Could you say something nicer? You know what I mean? Like that's the nicest thing. Yeah. It's wonderful. Yeah. So, I didn't really think that far ahead whenever we started making the show, and it's just proven to be like a really nice thing that's come out of it.
So you'd mentioned Pittsburgh once or twice. How has Pittsburgh influenced you, or has it at all, as far as like your work?
A lot of the backgrounds that you see in Street Angel are probably coming from Pittsburgh.
Nice.
You know, this is an old city that has had cycles of economic decline and success. And so I grew up in like a rural area close here, but not in the city. And whenever I moved here, I think it was like 1999 that I actually moved to Pittsburgh. I would just get up in the mornings, like on weekends, and go around and look at neighborhoods and take pictures of old buildings and stuff because I just liked the way it looked.
Right.
And so, you know, visually, it's definitely influenced, you know, that combination of like urban decay and renewal has certainly influenced, you know, my approach to drawing cities and backdrops and stuff like that. On another level, it's a very blue collar town. And I think that part of the reason that I do so much of my own work is because that's kind of, I don't know, it's part of the culture here of like, you know, do it yourself, DIY. And, you know, and the other piece is it's traditionally, at least whenever I moved here, was a very cheap city to live in. And so it had a very good art scene because artists could afford to live here and maybe work part-time and then just produce art as they were coming up.
Yeah.
And I met other cartoonists that were doing the same. And we're far enough away from New York that it was like, I don't have an editor that I can show my work to and get jobs, or I don't have a writing partner. I'm just going to make my own stuff. And so, you know, you think of Ed and Tom Scioli, and I have several other friends who make comics, and we just do everything ourselves. And so I think, you know, that's been sort of influential. Once you see everybody else doing it that way, it's kind of like, all right, that makes sense. I'm going to write and draw and create my own character. And then, you know, maybe I'll print it myself, you know, and it's a very healthy competition, but you see like your peers are doing it too. And having that support group's massive. When I moved here, I knew one other person that was trying to make comics, and we would meet every week. And it was like this positive peer pressure. You didn't want to show up without new pages, which is great. And it just grew, you know, like we started meeting more other local cartoonists that were in that same kind of mindset. We started traveling to shows together, which is part of how Cartoonist Kayfabe came about, because that was like the new comic shop for us. That's when we were all together and just talking comics for all weekend long. You know, that's where we were getting that enthusiasm for comics and sharing ideas. And so that's been real beneficial, is having a community of other cartoonists, which, you know, Pittsburgh has offered me.
So speaking about, you know, the Kayfabers and community, I think I would be remiss if I didn't mention that we were recording this interview on the first day of October. It also coincides with the first day of Kayfabetober, the Cartoonist Kayfabe version of Inktober. I want to know, whose idea was it, and what's been some of your favorite submissions for day one, which happens to be dedicated to the legendary Alex Toth?
I think it was Eli. You mentioned Eli, who had put together the Wizard Zine. And so I think he and a few people on that Cartoonist Kayfabe Facebook group were kicking around ideas and putting lists together and compiling what should be on that list. I haven't seen a lot of them. Today was actually a record day. So like I was gone. I've been offline before I came on to talk to you. So I've seen a couple of posts, you know, show up. I think I've seen a portrait or two of Alex Toth, which is really great. And then several space ghosts. One of the characters he's known for creating.
Yeah, the one that I think you guys posted on your account was, man, fantastic.
Yeah, all the ones I've seen have been great. I love seeing people interpret Toth too. This was something I was telling Ed as we just saw a couple of them, you know, after we recorded. And I was saying how like it's so interesting. In my mind, Alex Toth is completely defined. If you say Alex Toth, I have a picture in my mind of style and comics and what he looks like. Everybody has their own version of all this. You know, like we share this language, but the meanings are completely unique to each person. So like if the prompt is Alex Toth and 20 or 30 people do a drawing, it's so different. You know, their interpretations, what Toth means to each person. So that's been really cool kind of going through. And I'm looking forward to actually sitting down and looking at that hashtag a little more in depth for that reason, because just at a glance, that's the thing that stood out to me, is like, it's really interesting to think like I can look at an Alex Toth book and it's like, that's 100% Alex Toth. But if you look at it, what you'll remember from it will be different than what I remember from it. You know, what your favorite comic will be different than what mine is. And it's these drawings just really bring that, you know, make that very clear. And that's kind of awesome. I'm surprised by it. And it's day one and I've had like, you know, 10 seconds to look. So that surprise is pretty cool, pretty exciting.
All right, Jim, since you're already familiar with the Facebook group page, I think you'll enjoy this next segment that we created just for this episode. It's called Questions from the Ringside Seats. These are questions gathered from the online kayfabe community of the same name.
and I wanted to share them with you. One of the first questions I got was, with Octobriana being the world's first black light comic, has it gotten attention outside the comic world?
It has. Early on, I got some coverage locally, like in the local newspaper. And I think that led to a lot of sales. I ended up going on like a local kind of culture podcast that had a massive following. And I think, once I started shipping, I saw a lot of Pittsburgh addresses, and it wasn't people I knew. So, it's definitely gotten some coverage outside of comics only. One of the places that I got some was in like poster communities, and printed matter. That's something that I'm interested in as somebody who makes printed matter, but there's like a whole, art discipline of people who specialize in print. And so I think a lot of people from that kind of direction responded to it because, again, it is printed matter. It's just, slightly, there's some overlap. And so I definitely saw that kind of float through different blogs and different social media accounts.
Awesome. Another question I got from the Facebook group page was, what's your dream non-cartooning comic book job?
I have no idea what my dream NBA player. I'm not sure.
Oh, okay. I got to follow up to that. I noticed on your Tumblr, you recently posted a pic of Udonis Haslem from the Miami Heat that you drew almost a decade ago for Converse in celebration of the Miami Heat going to the NBA Finals. And I was curious, are you a sports fan? And if not, what extracurricular activities do you enjoy to unwind and take a break from comic book making?
Unwinding, I usually end up just watching, Netflix, Hulu kind of stuff with my wife. We've been rewatching Seinfeld lately.
Yes.
I am a big fan of sports storytelling. I did grow up in the southwestern Pennsylvania area. So like it would be stories about the Pittsburgh Steelers Super Bowl years or about, Mario Lemieux in hockey. And those things are framed really strongly in terms of narratives. Like there's a long tradition of sports writers. So I love that stuff. I used to read like old boxing, right? About stuff that, 40-year-old fights, but I just like the storytelling. And I think right now, like my favorite storytelling is NBA related stuff. I just think there's really good narratives that come out of that. So, I am much more of a reader of sports stories than I am watching sports. I don't find that experience as good. I think there's so much advertising and I don't really have time to watch 3 or 4 hours of something, but I thought of my dream job. I was driving by a campsite recently. It's kind of like out in the middle of the country, this giant camping area, and a monster truck was driving by like through these fields, and they had seats mounted in the back with like people strapped in, kind of like an amusement park ride or something, in a big roll cage. Monster truck driver. Like I'd like to be a monster truck driver.
Grave digger.
Preferably though, out in the fields, like these kinds of monster trucks rather than the ones like bouncing around. Yeah. I don't know how the monster truck drivers don't have a million concussions, because that comes from your brain bouncing against your skull, if I understand it correctly. And hey man, we've all been to monster truck rallies. Those trucks are bouncing around like it is chaos the way those things are bouncing around. Their brains have to be taking some bumps.
This is so nice. Yeah. They're mush.
I worry about the drivers.
Jim, real quick, back to your sports thing. I wanted to, do you watch, have you given like the 30 for 30 documentaries a shot? Okay.
I love that stuff. A sports documentary to me, that's sports storytelling. Like that stuff is often, sports have certain regimented qualities that real life, I think, doesn't always have. They have a hard beginning, middle, and end, which, a lot of life doesn't. We try to figure it out in comics or in movies or TV shows, but it's a little arbitrary. Sports have that, whether it's even an athlete's career where they're drafted and they play for however long and have to quit. Like there are all these like really hard kind of like defined moments in sports. They lend themselves to narrative analysis or stories. And yeah, man, 30 for 30, I think has been outstanding. I mentioned being a big wrestling fan, and I think in a lot of ways they do the same, they build on some of those same qualities. They sort of blend the sports storytelling, with a little bit more fiction narrative writing, but it's the same kind of idea where like those rules allow you to very clearly have these markers in terms of story and understanding story, and, breaking rules that are clearly defined can make for very compelling storytelling. So it lends itself to that. I've been a fan of that for most of my life, probably.
Well said.
George Romero used to film Steeler stuff.
Did he really?
Yeah, he did. In fact, I think he filmed for them whenever the year of the Immaculate Reception, like the most famous play in NFL history. And I'm not sure that his company isn't the one that filmed it. They only have one angle of that. I think they may have been the company that filmed that.
That's so cool. Like I just imagined,
George Romero.
Yeah, he's just chilling out there, and all of a sudden, like Tom
Between
Savini,
zombies, he's shooting football.
Yeah, Tom Savini's like, I'm gonna go get some hot dogs. You guys want anything? You know, like.
So we also had another question from the Cartoonist Kayfabe Facebook group. This one is related to your Ad House published project, Super Mag. The question was related to: do you have any plans to ever return to the magazine-sized one-man anthology format?
Think about that a lot. So maybe it's not on my schedule, but it's definitely something that I think about. It's probably one of the most flexible things I've ever done because it is like a one-person anthology. And I love magazines. I went to school in the 90s for graphic design. And at the time, it was like magazines were the cutting edge of graphic design in print. Like the designers, the art directors, they were the first ones that really had like a Macintosh sitting on their desk and being like, all right, put out next month's issue with this. And there just weren't really rules for them. So it was this amazing time. Like if you were studying design and then looking at what was on magazine racks, it was just like, mind blowing where like literally any month something could come out that would just break every rule that you were learning in class and that would people would be talking about it. So I grew up with those magazines and just kind of fell in love with those. That's how Super Mag happened in the first place. And, I am open to doing another one. I probably need to figure out a little bit more to put in it, but maybe someday. It's funny, like that was possibly my worst success, like it sold really poorly. And now we're basically sold out of that. We've been selling them since I started doing Cartoonist Kayfabe. They started to sell again. And then I was selling them as an extra or including them as an extra in Kickstarter. And I think after Octobriana, that was the biggest like item that people were picking up. And so maybe there's some demand for it now. It's a book I'm really proud of, but I'm not sure in the beginning that it found its audience, but over time it seems to have found that audience. So that
doesn't surprise me because the cover is, and please excuse my corny pun, but it is a kick in the face of a cover. Like it is attention grabbing as it can be. I don't know if you guys know Box Brown's work, but I'm friends with Box as a cartoonist. He does some really great wrestling comics. His Tetris book blew my mind when I read it, man.
There you go. His Andy Kaufman book is probably my favorite wrestling comic. If you're a fan of Andy Kaufman or wrestling. But he sent me the email and he's like, hey, man, I feel ripped off. There's no wrestling in this.
No, that's funny. The last question I've got from the Kayfabe group is it was related to the backstory on how your story, Aphrodisiac Dracula, landed in the Meat-Haus. Is it Meat-Haus? SOS trade paperback in 2008. And I'm assuming it has something to do with your connection with the School of Visual Arts.
It does not. It has something to do with my connection to Farrell Dalrymple and the Meat-Haus gang that came out of the School of Visual Arts. So somebody needs to do like a zine or a book on the history of cartoonist groups that come through the School of Visual Arts, because there are several of these different years that produce like Drew Friedman has this group whenever he was a student there, where it's like 3 or 4 amazing artists came out of that year. Farrell Dalrymple is with like James Jean and several other of these cartoonists and artists. Some of them went on to fine art or illustration, but like these groups that would have been in Meat-Haus that just phenomenal talents. And I think part of SVA's, what they do there, I think they have like a cartooning weekend where, like the undergrads, they make their comics and they sell them, it's kind of a big event. And so I think the people that are really into cartooning or whatever, they gravitate towards each other. And I met those guys at the first SPX I did and became friends. Like Farrell Dalrymple is a nice guy in comics and also maybe the most talented drawer in comics. And I've known him for like 20 years and he's just phenomenal. But we became friends like early on. So then we would room together. And so through my friendship and admiration of Meat-Haus, it just kind of like, I think I was in a few of the Meat-Haus anthologies, but that's probably the best story I did that made it into one of them. But it was just, by being around those guys and, all being the same age, going to the same shows, liking the same comics, that kind of thing.
Oh, thank you for sharing that. And I want to go ahead and thank the Cartoonist Kayfabe Facebook group page, Ringside Seats, for sending in those questions. In hindsight, I probably should have written some of their names down.
You're like, I'll just take credit for all those questions.
No.
Great questions, Botter. Great questions.
Good job, buddy. Good job.
I just edited out the mention of them. So Jim, I had some questions. No, thank you for that. Jim, we are nearing the end of this interview. C, do you got any last minute questions that you wanted to ask?
Actually, yeah. All
right. Well, anyways, Jim, we're going to go ahead and wrap it.
Mr. Big.
I turn it over to you, buddy. What do you got?
Actually, just kind of one sort of like cap to all this is, how would you define what a comic is?
Man, I don't know. That's a hard question. That's one of the biggest things I wrestle with in my SBA class when we do the short stories is we're doing them for digital publication. So even the idea of a page doesn't really exist, but we need some sort of like space to define, so somebody isn't doing something that should take 5 years or whatever. And it's what a comic is really hard to define at this point. I look at picture books a lot and they're almost the same, for a long time, picture books, and there are some that are clearly graphic novels, but they would identify as picture books because that's how you were sold through bookstores. And that's how you were carried in libraries because comics weren't for decades, welcome in either of those places. And the line is so blurred now because is it a comic if it's on screen? Of course it can be. Is it a comic if it's on your phone? Sure. Is it an Instagram? Like Simon Hanselman's been doing these comics on Instagram that are like 10 panels at a time, swiping them. They're clearly comics, but they're, I don't know how you define them. Scott McCloud did Understanding Comics, and he chose that it had to be sequential images, but there's a great rich history of like the single panel comics and cartoons and gag comics and stuff, political comics, editorial comics, all these things that are just single panel. So I don't even think you can describe it as needing to be two images together. Like you can do comics that are one image. So I don't know about a definition for that. Most of this stuff, I don't think there's a good definition for any of it. And especially if you're trying to think of are comics and graphic novels different? Are zines I have mini comics that are fooled out to be 8 feet wide and they're called mini comics, So I don't know about definitions, man. That's tough.
That was perfect though. That's good. Cause it's kind of like
everything.
It's kind of like a nebulous. Yeah. It's a nebulous answer, but it's almost kind of without getting too metaphysical, like the Tao, as soon as you understand what it is, you've lost it. Forget it. It's best to let it just be this awesome thing that is larger than all of us, but yet is tangible and we can hold it in our hands.
One of the things I love about comics is they aren't really defined.
Yep.
You can have, there are comics that are made of photos. There are comics that are made with no lines and just, with paint.
Sure.
I love all that stuff. So yeah, man, I just love comics, and show me the one that I haven't seen yet. Show me the one that doesn't fit my definition, and I'll expand my definition for you.
Perfect. Yeah.
Damn, well said. Jim, before we let you go, it is tradition here on the show that we wrap up our episodes with our champion season segment. So this is our opportunity to allow our guest a moment to champion something within the pop culture realm. So this could be a comic book, a TV series, a movie, a video game, etc. It really can be anything you want that you feel, hey, I have really been obsessed with this week. I recommend more people checking it out. It's awesome, and here's why. So I turn to you and ask, what do you want to champion today?
Well, I would champion Eternaut, but I've already done that one. So I'm gonna go to a second choice here, and I'm gonna champion Ping Pong by Taiyo Matsumoto. It's a manga that just came out in English 2 months ago, and it's about I guess middle school or high school ping pong players in Japan, and I mean competitive ping pong players. And so it follows sort of the samurai tradition of a bunch of these players who are striving to be the best. And it's incredible. One of the schools brings in a ringer from China. One of the kids is sort of this natural, just has amazing natural ability where other players hear him playing and recognize he's special. It's incredible. It's over the top. And the artwork is beautiful and dynamic. It's almost like something out of the Matrix movies. And the artist, I think he did it in the 90s. So it might have even predated the Matrix. But I mean, imagine these foreshortening Jack Kirby kind of incredible body stretching to make diving hits and things. And it's a perfect comic. So Ping Pong.
Are you throwing it in your cart right now?
I'm looking.
Is that what you're deciding?
I'm looking it up right now.
Jim, we have been asking you questions all night, and I don't think we can fully express our gratitude enough for you taking the time out to come on the show and talking about Octobriana and everything that we talked about. I want to go ahead and pass it to you and allow you to use this time to let people know what you're working on and where they can stay up to date with what you have going on.
Well, we've talked about the poster. That's the latest. We've talked about Octobriana and Street Angel and the Plain Janes. The thing that I would plug now is Cartoonist Kayfabe. If any of your listeners haven't checked that out, I would encourage them to do so. And we are doing like all horror comics, monster comics, Halloween kind of stuff in October every single day, where you're touching on some classics, some big time artists, and some really cool stuff that are our favorites that maybe people haven't heard of yet. So check out Cartoonist Kayfabe. It's the season of the witch, man, and it's going to be a very, very fun month on Cartoonist Kayfabe. If you like horror, if you like monsters, if you like stuff that's a little bit different, check it out. It'll be a fun month.
Awesome.
Well said.
I will go ahead and echo your sentiments. If you are not subscribed or aware of Cartoonist Kayfabe, it is one of the best comic book visual and audio inside scoops out there. So please check it out. And Jim, I just want to thank you again for your time and
thanks, man.
All the great things that we've gotten to chat with you about, and also for producing such a bomb-ass comic book. I cannot express enough how satisfied I am in supporting the Kickstarter and then getting the finished product. Like it has been a joy to read Octobriana.
That is awesome. Thank you guys so much. Really appreciate it.
Yeah,
our pleasure, man.
That's the end of our show, Shortbox Nation. Thank you for hanging out and sharing your most valuable commodity with us, which is your time. You could be listening to any other podcast, but you're here with us, and that means a lot. Thank you. It is appreciated. Hopefully you had a good time. I personally want to recognize and thank our sponsor, Gotham City Limit, along with the Cartoonist Kayfabe Ringside Seats Facebook group, and of course, our guest of honor, Jim Rugg. Like I mentioned in the intro, if you feel inclined to help us pay some podcast bills and keep this thing going, consider becoming a Shortbox patron. We'll reward you with bonus episodes, commercial-free listening, merch, and more. Check out what we have to offer for your contributions on our membership site, patreon.com/theshortbox. And with all that being said, listeners, stay safe, stay healthy, take care of yourselves, take care of each other. We'll have another remastered flashback episode next week before we arrive at our landmark 300th episode, which will be a spotlight on Amazing Spider-Man number 300. So make sure you're subscribed and stay tuned to the podcast feed. In the meantime, continue to make mine and yours Shortbox. And keep it geeky.